Many people saw Asian immigrants as the strongest threat to Canada's British and French character. This was especially true on Canada's Pacific coast, where many Asian immigrants had settled. Chinese, Japanese, and South Asian immigrants had always faced discrimination from employers and other colonists. In the late 1900s, the same time that Canada opened its doors to immigration, the government made it clear that some immigrants were more welcome than others.
Growing up in Vancouver, British Columbia, I've always been told how unfortunate to be living in Canada, and how immigration to Canada before was not as simple as traveling on a plane to a new country. My family's historical roots are from China, and I've always wondered what made them decide to move to Canada, and what made it so hard to move here. I always hear the common story of how immigrants before came to Canada for more opportunity, but what made Canada seem so opportune? My name is Stephen, and I'm a third-generation Chinese Canadian. I'd like to share with you the journey to Canada for many Chinese Canadians in British Columbia, and the struggles my family and others have had to endure to get here. Immigration from one country to another can be seen as a balance between push and pull factors. There were many factors that pushed the Chinese out of the Guangdong province. Overpopulation was a major problem, and low crop yields from floods and droughts led to famine and starvation. Economic prospects were also poor due to industrialized goods from the West converting the self-sufficient natural economy to a commodity-based market, which displaced many Chinese from their work. There were great political issues as well, as the weak Qing dynasty was defeated by many imperial countries and lost resources and land, most notably the Treaty of Nanjing, which ended the First Opium War between 1839 and 1842 and rendered Hong Kong under British rule. There was also the Taiping Revolution from 1850 to 1864 due to social and economic unrest, and which killed 20 million Chinese. Many Chinese who have deep historical roots mostly originated from a few counties in the Guangdong province. At the time, Guangdong was the only trade port in connection to the West, and through this, word about the gold rush quickly spread as a way to earn a quick fortune. The first influx of Chinese to British Columbia was from 1858 to 1860, where Chinese came from California and Guangdong in search of Gold Mountain. The boat ride from China was not pleasant. Often they were overcrowded with poor sanitation and a lack of food, resulting in some dying on the 60-day voyage. BC joined Canada in 1871 with the condition that a transcontinental railway be built to link them. Approximately 17,000 Chinese workers came to work on the Canadian Pacific Railway to provide money for home. They were exploited with very low wages, and poor working conditions and malnutrition caused many to die. Many intended to go back to China, but could not afford to, and established Chinese communities in BC. After the completion of the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1885, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed to limit the immigration rate of Chinese. New immigrants were required to pay a $50 head tax to enter Canada. The head tax was later raised to $100 in 1900 and to $500 in 1903.
The Chinese head tax.
Working and living in BC was very tough in the early 1900s. The anti-Chinese sentiments and institutional racism against Chinese disenfranchised them from the right to vote, along with unfair treatment from the law, restrictions from entering the country through the head tax, and restrictions on becoming Canadian citizens. The Chinese were brought for utilitarian measures, but not as citizens, and often were blamed for displacing white workers. The anti-Chinese sentiment was a deterrent for Chinese families to immigrate to Canada.
South Asian immigrants. It was harder for the government to exclude people from India to immigrate to Canada because India was part of the British Empire. In 1908, to reduce the number of South Asian immigrants, the government increased the landing money for South Asians to $200. Landing money was the amount of money immigrants had to have in their possession upon entering Canada.